Hey, welcome back everybody. We're heading into Chapter 8 and Chapter 9. Chapter 8 is on photosynthesis, Chapter 9 is on cellular respiration. Today's objectives are to differentiate between an autotroph and a heterotroph, and also to differentiate between ADP and ATP. So let's take a little bit of time to talk about energy within life and how each organism gets their energy. All living things need energy. There's several different types of energy that they could need: heat energy, chemical energy, ATP energy, which we will talk about in a few slides. Plants capture their energy from the sunlight to produce food. These are called autotrophs. An autotroph is anything that produces its own food. Animals get their energy from their food, so they eat other organisms in order to gain energy, and these are called heterotrophs. If we take a look at the pictures down here, the frog mainly eats insects. It is a heterotroph because it eats other organisms. The clover makes its energy from sunlight, so it is an autotroph. The last two are a little different. We have a Venus flytrap and a pitcher plant. Both of these make energy from the sun in a process called photosynthesis, but they also eat insects. In a Venus flytrap, the insects would get caught on the inner layer, and the trap will close, and it will digest the bugs by these liquid enzymes that will basically dissolve the bug, and then the plant will just take up the liquid that is remaining. The pitcher plant has a very smelly, attractive scent to it that traps bugs into the little chute here. It goes down where there are several different types of acids that will dissolve the bug, and the nutrients will then be sucked up by the plant. So there's an argument here that the pitcher plant and the Venus flytrap are both autotrophic because they photosynthesize, and heterotrophic because they dissolve and use nutrients from insects to live. We're going to talk a little bit about chemical energy. One of the most important compounds that living things use to store energy is called ATP. ATP is adenosine triphosphate. Adenosine triphosphate is made up of three parts. We have our adenine right here, we have a ribose sugar right here, and three phosphate groups. Now if we take a look at ADP, which is adenosine diphosphate, it has the same three groups. We have our adenine, we have our ribose sugar, but it only has two phosphate groups instead of the three. A key thing to remember here is that ATP holds energy, and when we need that energy, we have to break a bond off the phosphate group. So remember, when a bond is broken, energy is released. So let's take a look at the ATP-ADP cycle. When ATP gives up some energy, a bond is broken, a phosphate is released, and also with that bond being broken, energy is released. That turns into ADP. ATP has the capability of bonding another phosphate on there, and it will do that by taking energy from food and a free-floating phosphate, and it will convert it back into ATP. So notice the cycle here that happens. When the body needs energy, it uses ATP by breaking a bond down, releasing energy, and whenever we eat food, we can store that chemical energy using an ADP molecule, some energy from our food, and a free-floating phosphorus. Two things to keep in mind: ADP is able to store energy, it wants to add that extra phosphorus, and ATP is able to release energy because we can snap that bond between the last two phosphorus, and energy can be released for us to use. So today's tutorial was a rather short one. We differentiated between an autotroph and a heterotroph. An autotroph is a plant or any organism that makes their own food. A heterotroph is an organism that eats other organisms to get their food or energy. An example of that would be human. We also differentiated between ADP and ATP. The only difference between the two, really structurally, is that ATP has 3 phosphate groups, ADP has 2, and just remember that ADP wants to store energy by adding another phosphate group. ATP wants to release energy by breaking that last bond between the last 2 phosphoruses and to release energy for the cells to use. If you have any questions on this tutorial, please feel free to bring them to our next class.